Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. This is a briefing on the proposed management agreement with the Fair Park Texas Foundation for Fair Park. I'll begin on page 2, which provides some background on Fair Park, which many of you are well aware of. It's a 277-acre park. It's the largest collection of Art Deco architecture in the United States. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1986 by the National Park Service. It's home to multiple cultural institutions, venues, the home of many signature events and attractions in our city. In 2011, Fair Park was designated by the American Planning Association as one of the great public spaces in America. And this year, I'm very proud to announce that Fair Park was recognized by the International Association of Venue Managers with their 2 Venue Excellence Awards. Little background now on how we got to today. In 2013, Mayor Rawlings appointed the Mayor's Fair Park Task Force. This was chaired by Linda Evans. The task force was charged with examining the future of Fair Park, capitalizing on the many strengths of Fair Park, enabling it to reach its full potential, and making recommendations that would address long-standing challenges and realize real improvements at Fair Park. So these recommendations would specifically address the issue of inadequate funding, the absence of green space, the lack of cohesive governance and a marketing body, and the misconceptions regarding park safety. On September 3rd, 2014, there was a joint session of the Dallas City Council and the Park and Recreation Board, in which a presentation entitled "A Park for All People" was presented. The recommendations from that presentation were to enhance access and connectivity with both the community and the city, to establish a community park on the south side of Fair Park, and to empower a new nonprofit organization as the operational and marketing authority for Fair Park. The next couple of pages illustrate the timeline and the amount of time, as the Mayor indicated, that we've been working on this project. Beginning with the joint City Council Park Board meeting in September, and then through May of the following year, the Park and Recreation Board undertook discussion of the recommendations from the Mayor's Fair Park Task Force. In December of 2014, beginning in December through February of 2016, there were a number of public input meetings held. In May of 2015, the Park Board authorized the adoption of the recommendations of the Mayor's Fair Park Task Force with several modifications. And in November of last year, 2015, Councilmember Young hosted a community meeting at the African American Museum. On November the 18th of last year, 2015, the City Council was briefed on the future of Fair Park by Walt Heumann. February 8th, the City Council hosted a public input meeting at the Hall of State. Between April and August of 2016, the Park and Recreation Board undertook discussion of the deal points for this proposed management agreement with the Foundation. And then on August the 4th, the Board approved the draft management agreement. And so page 7 is basically a summary page before we get into the deal points about the public-private partnership. One of the recommendations is to sufficiently fund the operation of Fair Park. This would come several ways. Number one, increase the staffing in the areas of marketing, events and programming, development, and community outreach. To add trades staff, these are plumbers, painters, carpenters, electricians, to address periodic maintenance and enhance the facilities and amenities upkeep. And then finally, to engage administrative services, including HR, legal, accounting, communications, and IT. Secondly, in this public-private partnership, it would leverage private and public dollars for Fair Park enhancements and improvements to address the improvement of aesthetics and the functionality of the spaces and facilities, to create a new community park and green spaces, and to stimulate the economic growth through investment in Fair Park and the surrounding community. Now I'd like to take you through the deal points, and beginning on page 9 is sort of an overall summary of what we have to present to you today. Basically, we're talking about a contract between the City of Dallas and the Fair Park Texas Foundation for the management, maintenance, operation, and marketing of Fair Park. Secondly, I want to emphasize that Fair Park will continue to be an asset owned by the City of Dallas but managed by the Foundation. And finally, the City will pay an annual management fee to the Foundation to fully support Fair Park as a public park, maintaining and managing the grounds and facilities as a vibrant year-round location for events and activities. And I'd like to point out here that the management fee is really, it represents an enhancement of the city's current budget for Fair Park, and I'll get more into that in a moment. So beginning on page 10, I'd like to take you through some high-level deal points now, and we've got these in order according to the contract. So starting with the first article, which has to do with the purpose and the term of the management agreement. The city appoints the Foundation as the exclusive operator and manager of Fair Park, and the Foundation in turn commits to fully and completely support Fair Park as a public park solely for park purposes for the benefit of the city's residents and visitors. And we've got the section of the contract cited there if we need to refer to that contract in questions. Secondly, the Foundation will pursue certain performance objectives. The creation, and these objectives include the creation and maintenance of a community park, to support and enhance Fair Park as a National Historic Landmark, maintenance and enhancement of the various cultural institutions, and the maintenance and enhancement of the sporting and recreational venues at Fair Park. These were objectives specifically defined by the Park Board. The term of this agreement would commence on January 1st, 2017 and extend for 20 years. There would be 2 consecutive 5-year renewal terms. Article 2 has to do with ownership, transfers, and transition. So the first bullet point, the city will retain ownership of the land and the real property interests and improvements. And the city will convey to the Foundation the personal property utilized by Fair Park for its daily operations. And we list some of the items there that would constitute personal property, with the exception that the city will not convey public art, will not convey historic furnishing. So we just wanted to point that out in particular. Continuing on Article 2 on page 12, City will sign and the Foundation will assume all Fair Park contracts, with one exception. The Foundation shall provide the upkeep, maintenance, repair, security, storage, etc., to the extent the Foundation receives funding from the City. And the Foundation will assume the City's payment obligations related to the 3 annual football games played in the Cotton Bowl. Now, the exception that I mentioned is the contract for the Children's Aquarium at Fair Park will not be transferred or assigned to the Foundation. It will continue to be governed by the Dallas Zoo Agreement executed in 2009. The reason for that is simply because the aquarium needs to be accredited by the National Accreditation Association for Zoos and Aquariums, and that can best be accomplished while it is under the Dallas Zoo and not under the Fair Park Texas Foundation. Article 3 has to do with the management fee and other fiscal matters. The city will pay the Foundation a management fee, and again I want to reiterate, this is more of an enhancement of our current budget for Fair Park. The management fee for 2016-17 is proposed to be $12,525,000, less $1 million in transition funds that will be provided no later than October 31st. So after January 1st, the management fee would be $11,525,000 balance. Then in year 2, the management fee would increase by $2 million to $18.7 million. So let me explain that. So the management fee for year 1 would normally be $16.7 million, but we're prorating it because the commencement date, instead of being October 1, would be now January 1st. We cannot get to an October 1st commencement date. So we prorated the management fee to $12,525,000 in the first year. That means that for the first quarter of the fiscal year, 16-17, Fair Park would remain under the operation and funding of the Park and Recreation Department. So year 2, the escalation is to $18.7 million, and then in year 3, the management fee would increase by a final $2 million to $20.7 million. And there would be no CPI adjustment on that. Beginning in October of 2017, the management fee would be provided to the foundation in equal quarterly installments. On page 14, the city, subject to City Council approval, will seek voter consideration to authorize bond funds for certain Fair Park capital bond projects in the next 2 upcoming bond programs. So again, this is subject to City Council approval. The proposal for 2017 bond program would be an allocation of $75 million for Fair Park, which would be matched by the Fair Park Texas Foundation with $50 million in non-city funds. There is also a request for a second bond program at some point in the future, where there would be an equal a request of $50 million from the city to be matched by $50 million from the private sector. These bond program amounts here do not include funding for projects outside of the Fair Park boundaries. So I know there's a lot of interest in infrastructure, street and drainage improvements outside of Fair Park that might also be considered, but that's not part of this contract. Continuing with Article 3 on page 15, the foundation will fund the resident institutions at Fair Park to support their programming, their utility payments, their maintenance, and other support. If the City Council appropriates the full management fee, the foundation shall allocate at least $1.3 million to these resident institutions. So that's the current amount that the Office of Cultural Affairs and the Park and Recreation Department are currently funding the resident institutions at $1.3 million. So that would remain in place. If the council appropriates less than the full management fee, the foundation will reduce proportionally the funding amount to these resident institutions. The foundation will also utilize the Office of Cultural Affairs annual application and review process for the evaluation and recommendation for funding support. So the institutions would go through the normal process with the Office of Cultural Affairs. The recommendation would be made to the Cultural Affairs Commission, and they would in turn recommend program funding to the Fair Park Texas Foundation for the institutions. And finally, the foundation has an obligation to conserve the public art at the direction of the Office of Cultural Affairs Director in proportion to any bond funds that are received. Article 4 has to do with management and operation. The Fair Park Texas Foundation is a newly formed nonprofit organization formed to operate Fair Park. It's governed by a 9-member board of directors that has enacted bylaws. At least, and this was an important requirement from the Park and Recreation Board, that at least one member of this 9-member board shall be from and represent the surrounding Fair Park community, and at least one member shall be from and represent the historic preservation community. So those 2 seats are on the 9-person board. And Mr. Heumann can tell you more about his board in a moment. The Fair Park will also be used solely for park purposes. This has to do with state law. Park purposes are defined as recreation, culture, sports, entertainment, and education with either a recreation or cultural component. A performance plan with performance indicators will be developed in order for the Park and Recreation Board to evaluate the performance of the foundation. This was another very important component of this management agreement for the Park Board. The indicators will include, but not be limited to, the items that you see listed here, including number of visitors, events, operating revenues, etc., the contributions for a signature community park, amount of green space created, and the foundation's progress in meeting the city's BID plan. The foundation will also submit the performance plan to the Park and Recreation Board, subject to Park Board review and approval. On page 18, the foundation shall provide to the Park and Recreation Board reports on its activities at Fair Park. During the first 2 years of the contract, the foundation will report to the Park Board in person at Park Board meetings no less than quarterly. That's for the first 2 years. And then beginning in 2020, the foundation will provide an annual report to the Park Board that summarizes its performance under the performance plan. If the foundation fails to meet any performance indicator in the performance plan by deviation of 10% or more, the foundation will engage at its own expense an independent consultant to develop and oversee the implementation of a remediation plan. Page 19 has to do with personnel. The foundation has agreed to employ, pay, supervise, and discharge all personnel the foundation determines to be necessary for the management of Fair Park and its performance under this agreement. And then also, very importantly, the foundation has agreed to make an offer of employment to all city employees currently based at Fair Park effective on the commencement date. This differs from the Dallas Zoo when we privatized in 2009, where the city employees at the zoo were RIFed and then had to apply for a job with the Zoological Society. So in this case, the foundation has agreed to offer employment to every Fair Park employee. Article 4, also continuing in management and operation. This has to do with public relations, marketing, promotion, advertising, and fundraising. The foundation shall have exclusive authority for all public relations, everything there. Foundation shall have exclusive right to plan, design, implement, and manage all fundraising efforts, including donor recognition. And then under naming and sponsorships, the foundation shall have the right to contract for and grant sponsorships, advertising space, and naming rights at Fair Park. Article 6 on page 21 has to do with maintenance, alterations, and construction. The first point is the foundation shall maintain and repair Fair Park on a regular basis and as needed to keep Fair Park in good working order and in a safe, attractive, and orderly condition and in compliance with comparable park industry standards. With respect to any repair, maintenance, or alterations performed by the foundation, all such work will be at their sole cost and expense, and foundation contracts related to this activity will require the contractor to use good faith efforts to comply with the city's BID plan. All plans and specs for alterations exceeding $100,000, and this is what we term the construction threshold amount, all projects exceeding $100,000 shall be submitted to the director for review and approval. The community park is discussed on page 22 in section 6.16 of the contract. During the first year of the term of this agreement, the foundation will undertake the conceptual designs for a signature community park located within Fair Park. And that park, when it's constructed, will be open to the public free of charge on a year-round basis, including during the annual State Fair of Texas. Foundation will commence construction of this signature park within 24 months of funding becoming available. Article 7 is revenue opportunities. Fair Park revenues will be retained by the foundation for the operation, marketing, and maintenance of Fair Park. Those revenues include, but are not necessarily limited to, the items listed here, including parking fees, rents and other user fees, programming fees and revenues, concession and vendor revenue, naming, advertising, and sponsorship rights, and in revenues from Fair Park contracts. Except for the annual State Fair of Texas and other special events, admission to the grounds of Fair Park will remain free of charge. Article 9 has to do with financial reports and transparency. The foundation shall submit its annual operating budget for its upcoming fiscal year not less than 60 days prior to the end of each foundation fiscal year. The foundation will furnish to the city within 90 days after the close of each quarter unaudited financial statements of each quarter, which will include balance sheets, statements of operation, statements of cash flow. So quarterly, the foundation will provide unaudited financial statements to the Park Department. And then finally, the foundation will provide to the city within 120 days after the close of the fiscal year audited financial statements prepared by an independent certified public accountant. Article 13 has to do with defaults and remedies. In the event of any foundation default, the city will have the right upon notice to the foundation to terminate the agreement effective not less than 90 nor more than 180 days after the notice. In the event of city default, similarly, the foundation may also serve notice on the city to terminate the agreement within that 90 to 180 day time frame. The city and the foundation have the right to terminate for non-appropriation of management fee. The foundation has a right to terminate if a bond election is unsuccessful and the city is unable to secure alternate financing by the 4th anniversary of the date of the bond election. Mr. Mayor and Council, that concludes my presentation on the deal points for the proposed management agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Winters.